Welcome back occultists to a new video. These stories may be triggering or graphic for some due to the subject matter. Have you ever been in love? If so, then you know it can hurt sometimes. People will go to unbelievable lengths to obtain that which is no longer an option. If you are new to the channel, make sure to like and subscribe for more content. Let's begin. My name is Emily, and for years, I lived under the shadow of fear, a fear so palpable it colored every aspect of my life. It all started when I decided to leave my husband, Mark. I thought I was freeing myself from a toxic relationship, but in reality, I was stepping into a nightmare that would haunt me for years to come. Mark never took our divorce well. His love, which had once been a source of comfort, turned into an obsession. At first, it was just phone calls at all hours of the night, his voice oscillating between pleading and anger. Then, it escalated to him showing up at my workplace, causing scenes that left me embarrassed and scared. I sought a restraining order, thinking it would protect me, but it only seemed to provoke him further. The more I tried to distance myself, the more he tried to invade every corner of my life. One evening, after a long day at work, I came home to find something that chilled me to the bone. My house, which had always been my sanctuary, had been broken into. But nothing was stolen. Instead, there were photos of Mark and me scattered all over the floor, some defaced with angry scribbles. I called the police, but without solid evidence, there was little they could do. I felt helpless, a prisoner in my own life. The home I had once cherished now felt like a trap, its walls closing in on me. The incidents grew more frequent and more disturbing. I would find notes on my car, see shadows lurking near my home at night, hear whispers just outside my window. Mark was everywhere and nowhere, a ghost that haunted my every step. One night, the situation reached a terrifying climax. I was alone at home, the silence of the house a heavy weight. I had just settled into bed when I heard it, the sound of glass breaking downstairs. My heart leapt into my throat. I knew, with a sinking feeling, that it was him. I grabbed my phone, ready to call the police, but then I heard his voice, cold and menacing, drifting up the stairs. "Emily, I know you're here. You can't hide from me." The fear was paralyzing. I was trapped, with nowhere to run. I could hear him moving through the house, methodically searching each room. His footsteps were a steady drumbeat of impending doom. I crawled under the bed, my body shaking with fear. I could hear him getting closer, his presence a dark force that filled the room. He stopped just outside the bedroom door, and for a moment, there was silence. Then, the door creaked open, and his footsteps entered the room. I held my breath, praying he wouldn't find me. But it was a futile hope. He found me, his hands grabbing my ankles and dragging me out from under the bed. The terror was overwhelming. I struggled, screamed for help, but it was just us in the house, a predator and his prey. He was ranting, a stream of accusations and threats. In his eyes, I saw something that froze my blood, not anger, but something much worse. Madness. He raised his hand, and I braced myself for the blow. But it never came. Instead, there was a loud bang, the sound reverberating through the room. Mark collapsed, a look of surprise on his face. Standing in the doorway was my neighbor, John, a gun still smoking in his hand. He had heard the commotion and came to investigate. The police arrived soon after, taking Mark's lifeless body away. I was in shock, the events of the night a blur of terror and disbelief. In the days that followed, I struggled to come to terms with what had happened. Mark, the man I had once loved, had become a monster in my eyes, a specter of fear that had controlled my life. I moved away, started anew in a different town. But the scars of those years remained, a constant reminder of the horror I had endured. I often wonder if I could have done something differently, if there was a moment where I could have saved both of us from the nightmare that our lives became. But the answers are as elusive as the shadows that once haunted me. Now, as I sit here, years later, the memories are still vivid, a dark chapter in the story of my life. It's a tale of fear and survival, a reminder of the darkness that can lurk beneath the surface of love, waiting to consume everything in its path. I never thought love could turn into a nightmare until I met Anna. We were the quintessential happy couple, or so I believed. But beneath her charming smile and bright eyes lurked a darkness I failed to see until it was too late. My name is Michael, and this is the story of how my attempt to break free from a relationship turned into a horrifying ordeal. Anna and I had been together for 2 years, but as time passed, I realized we were not meant to be. Our once passionate relationship had soured, marred by constant arguments and a growing sense of disconnection. I decided it was best for both of us to end things amicably. I was naive to think it would be that simple. The day I told Anna I wanted to break up, her reaction was not of tears or anger, but of an eerie calmness. She smiled, a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes, and simply said, "You can't get rid of me that easily, Michael." I didn't think much of it at the time, dismissing it as a coping mechanism. But within days, my life spiraled into a waking nightmare. It started with texts and voicemails, dozens of them, day and night. When I blocked her number, she found other ways to reach me: emails, letters, even messages through friends. Each message was a mix of pleas and threats, declarations of undying love interspersed with ominous warnings. Then came the sightings. I would see her outside my workplace, standing across the street, just staring at me. I would come home to find things amiss in my apartment, items moved, pictures turned upside down. It was as if she wanted me to know she was there, a ghost haunting my every step. I went to the police, but they said there was little they could do unless she made a direct threat against me. I felt helpless, trapped in a situation that was spiraling out of control. One night, the situation escalated. I came home to find my apartment door ajar. My heart racing, I cautiously stepped inside. The place was in disarray, my belongings scattered on the floor. And there, in the middle of the chaos, stood Anna. Her appearance was disheveled, her eyes wild with an emotion I couldn't decipher. "We are meant to be together, Michael," she said, her voice a haunting whisper. "You can't leave me. You'll never leave me." I tried to reason with her, to get her to leave, but she refused. There was a desperation in her, a manic glint in her eyes that scared me. I realized then that the woman I once loved had vanished, replaced by someone unrecognizable, unhinged. I managed to get her out of my apartment, but the sense of safety I once felt was shattered. I stayed with a friend that night, too afraid to return home. The following days were a blur of paranoia and fear. I would see her everywhere, on the street, outside my office, near my friend's house. She was always there, watching, waiting. I decided to move, to start anew in a different city. I thought distance would dampen her obsession, would give me a chance to rebuild my life. But I was wrong. The night before I was set to leave, she appeared at my friend's house. It was late, the world shrouded in darkness. She broke in, armed with a knife, her eyes reflecting a madness that chilled my blood. The confrontation was violent and terrifying. She lunged at me, screaming about how we were meant to be together forever. I fought back, a struggle for survival against someone I no longer recognized. In the chaos, the knife found its mark. I felt a searing pain in my side, the world spinning as I fell to the ground. The last thing I saw was her face, twisted in a grotesque mask of love and hate. I woke up in the hospital, the sterile white of the room a stark contrast to the darkness of that night. The police told me Anna had fled the scene, her whereabouts unknown. I recovered physically, but the scars of that night remained. I moved to a new city, changed my name, started over. But the fear never left me. I was always looking over my shoulder, jumping at shadows, haunted by the memory of Anna's twisted love. The experience changed me, made me wary of getting close to anyone. I lived my life in a state of constant vigilance, a prisoner of the past. Anna was never found. She became a ghost, a terrifying memory that lurks in the depths of my mind. I often wonder what became of her, if she ever found peace or if her obsession consumed her. My story is a cautionary tale, a reminder of how love can turn into something dark and destructive. It's a tale I wish I could forget, a chapter of my life I wish I could close. But some horrors stay with you, a shadow that follows you, no matter how far you run. For years, I thought I had escaped my past, that the horrors of my previous relationship were behind me. But I was wrong. My name is Sarah, and this is the story of how my past came back to haunt me in the most terrifying way possible. It had been 5 years since I left my ex, David. He was possessive, controlling, and his love had turned into an obsession that I couldn't bear. So, I did what I thought was best. I left without a trace, moved to a different city, and started a new life. For years, I lived in peace, the memories of David slowly fading into the background. But that all changed one fateful night. I had just returned from work, the sun setting behind the skyline of my quiet suburban neighborhood. As I pulled into my driveway, I noticed a car parked across the street, one I didn't recognize. A sense of unease crept over me, but I brushed it off as paranoia. I made my way inside, locking the door behind me. The house was quiet, the only sound the ticking of the clock on the wall. I was about to head to the kitchen when I heard it, a faint tapping on the window. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. The tapping continued, persistent and ominous. I gathered my courage and approached the window, pulling back the curtain. There, standing outside, was David. My breath caught in my throat. He looked different, his hair unkempt, his eyes wild with an emotion I couldn't decipher. But it was undoubtedly him. He smiled when he saw me, a twisted smile that sent shivers down my spine. "Hello, Sarah," he said, his voice muffled through the glass. "I've missed you." Panic surged through me. I backed away from the window, my mind racing. How did he find me? What did he want? I reached for my phone to call the police, but before I could dial, I heard the sound of glass breaking. I turned to see David climbing through the broken window, shards of glass littering the floor around him. The next moments were a blur of terror. David lunged at me, his hands reaching for my throat. I fought back, kicking and screaming, trying to get away from him. He was relentless, fueled by a madness that was almost palpable. I managed to break free and ran to the kitchen, grabbing a knife from the drawer. David followed, his movements erratic and unpredictable. We faced off in the kitchen, a deadly dance of victim and predator. He lunged at me again, and I swung the knife, a desperate attempt to protect myself. The knife found its mark, plunging into his side. He stumbled back, a look of surprise on his face. Blood seeped through his shirt, staining it a dark crimson. I didn't wait to see what would happen next. I ran out of the house, screaming for help. Neighbors came out of their homes, alerted by the commotion. The police arrived shortly after, taking David into custody. He was still alive, but barely. I was taken to the hospital, my body and mind in shock from the ordeal. In the days that followed, I learned the extent of David's obsession. He had been tracking me for years, biding his time, waiting for the right moment to strike. He had driven miles, fueled by a delusion that we were meant to be together. The encounter left deep scars, both physical and emotional. I moved again, changed my name, and tried to start over. But the fear never left me. I was always looking over my shoulder, always wondering if David would come back. I tried to rebuild my life, but the terror of that night lingered. I was a survivor, but the memory of David's crazed eyes, of the violence he was capable of, haunted my dreams. My story is a reminder of the darkness that can hide within someone, of the terror that can come from the past. It's a tale of survival, but also a warning that sometimes the most dangerous monsters are the ones we once loved.